This is going to be the ultimate bottom bracket video. You guys always ask me in the comments, what is the best bottom bracket? What's the best bottom bracket standard? By the end of this video, you will know exactly all of these types of bottom brackets, which is the best and what is the best, press fit or threaded. Let's go. Before we get deep into this, let's just dismiss some absolute no-goes. First of all, Italian. I don't even have an example here to show you. It's about time that Italian threads die. They tend to undo themselves, and as they do, they expand and all sorts of problems happen. Next one, BB30. Cannondale have pretty much ditched this. It's about time that everyone else ditches it as well. This is just 42mm bearings pressed directly into a carbon frame. Never a good idea. And of course, Trek BB90, similar idea, but even smaller bearings. These three systems just need to die, really. Right, onto the good stuff now. This is the humble BSA bottom bracket. Everyone thinks BSA stands for British Standard something. It's not. BSA actually used to make motorcycles and weapons, actually. You might have seen them on the Peaky Blinders when Tommy Shelby nicked all the weapons. Anyway, this is perfect because they have a normal thread on the non-drive side, but the drive side is reversed. So the act of pedaling actually physically tightens the bottom bracket into the frame as you go. So it makes for a really good, durable system. And if you are running cranks such as Square Taper, ISIS, Octolink, or Hologram, or even GXP on a metal frame, this is absolutely ideal. So long as you have these threads nice and clean and this face here is perfectly faced, this is going to be a really, really durable solution. In fact, millions and millions of cyclists are enjoying threaded bottom brackets like this with their Shimano cranks every single day, no bother at all. So why did we bother changing it? So the reason it had to change is because carbon fiber. You see, we now had this problem where to try and get threads into a carbon frame, we had to glue in an insert like you can see here. The problem with that is as it comes out of the factory, we essentially take this hole left by the carbon molds, and we now have to glue in a aluminium tube essentially that we can then thread the bottom bracket into. And as a lot of you already know, that these become debonded because the quality of that bonding very much depended on the factory. You see, sometimes you'd get a factory, just take it out of the mold, get a tube, I swear to God, a little bit of dab of glue, whack it in, job done. What really needs to happen is that these need to be meticulously cleaned, both surfaces, a really good layer of glue applied, pushed in, put in a temperature controlled room, let to cure, and then you might get a good solid bond. But that didn't always happen. So we ended up with press fit. Press fit is actually an amazing invention that was so badly executed and mechanics were very, very poorly trained on how to actually use it as well. And as a result, it's got a really, really bad reputation. But it became so popular because, in a sense, we got rid of this aluminium section, which is just weight. And at this era, it was all about, I want my frame to be the lightest possible. So why are we sticking a big lump of metal into our frame when we can just have an empty hole? So let's talk about press fit. So press fit then, sometimes known as BB89 or BB92 for mountain bikes. This is a 41mm hole. Now the reason this got such a bad reputation was because manufacturing standards went through the toilet, and also mechanics were never actually that well trained on how to actually install them. So if these are fitted up properly, absolutely fantastic system, no bother at all. And it's actually really simple. All you need to do is take this press fit hole, make sure it is reamed to a 40.98 diameter. All bike shops should have a 40.98 reamer in there, and then just take a standard Shimano bottom bracket. Now this is actually a plastic shell, so there's loads of compliance built into this to deal with any slight misalignment issues. And the Dura-Ace XTR versions of these are absolutely fantastic, as are the Ultegra ones. And this should never really cause you any problems so long as your frame and your mechanic has installed it properly. And remember, dry fit. There's no need to put any special grease on here or anything. Read the specifications, it's all there. The problem with these came when Cannondale introduced the world to BB30 30mm axles, and SRAM introduced the world to Dub 29 point something axles. And if you try and have a 41mm hole here and a 30mm hole here, you end up with a very, very small row of bearings, which is pretty suboptimal and completely ruined the entire cycling experience for anyone that tried to ram something like this into a hole like that. And that means we need a bigger hole in our frame. So on to the next bike. So the answer to all this was we needed a bigger hole. So I introduced the world to PF30, BB386 Evo, and the world of T47 as well. So first of all, on the press fit side, PF30, not to be confused with BB30 because Cannondale labels them both the same, but we have a 46mm hole, which we would normally ream to 45.97. Again, using the reamer, if you set this all up correctly, absolutely no bother. Now the great thing about the 46mm system is that you can convert it down to almost anything, so you can have 24mm hole for Shimano's, you can have a 30mm hole, or you can have GXP or Dub or whatever it is, all from that 46mm hole, and every single time you've got a decent sized bearing that's going to be durable and waterproof and generally be a good solution. The problem came once again when manufacturers couldn't make it properly and bike mechanics couldn't install it properly, which kind of led to Chris King developing the T47 system. First of all, starting off with the T47 external, a bit like our BSA but just bigger, and then eventually T47 internal. So we still have all that versatility of our axle sizes, but now with a much bigger bearing. Happy days, right? Maybe not. Now we've decided that the 46mm size or the T47 size is a good idea. We now need to start thinking about the shell width. Now, this is where PF30 ended up being a little bit too narrow, and you ended up having to use loads of adapters to try and space it out. And as you know, running adapters on top of bearings is never a good idea. So you're trying to get the cranks as close as you can to the bearings. So BB386 Evo was a fantastic standard, and I still think is my favourite standard. However, consumer demand decided that they didn't like press fit anymore and they wanted thread fit, which is why we are now starting to see more and more brands develop things like T47 internal. So let's take a look at T47. So this is where we are with T47 then. So we're now back to an aluminium tube bonded into a carbon frame. Now there is a small advantage with this, and that is we've now got a much larger surface area for that gluing process to actually happen, meaning that we've got a much higher chance of that actually being sustainable. It still requires some manufacturing excellence to make sure that is going to stay put, but I think we've got a better chance. Now the downside of this is that this is the bottom bracket, is what it looks like. We've got a very, very narrow lip here where the tool engages, which means it needs a little bit of care and attention when you're installing and removing these to make sure that your tool doesn't slip and damage your frame, or worse, damage the bottom bracket. But they actually work the same way as BSA, where the non-drive side is normal threaded and the drive side is reverse threaded, so they actually tighten into each other. So quite a clever little design. So let's finish this video up with what bottom bracket is best in each one of these situations, and then finally put a name to the best bottom bracket system on the planet. Before we get onto the finalists and of course the winner, I need to have a quick chat about problem solving bottom bracket. Now, if you're unlucky enough to have a BSA and you're trying to fit something with a 30mm or a SRAM dub through, you're going to need a bottom bracket that looks a bit like this. And this area always becomes a bit of a weak point, so these aren't a great solution. But the other problem you might have is if you have something really badly misaligned, like you've probably seen on the Hambini channel, in which case a Hambini bottom bracket is probably the only way of solving really bad misalignment problems. But in reality, those frames should really have been picked up and gone back under warranty. You can normally solve most bottom bracket problems just by making sure that the hole is the right size and the bottom bracket has been fitted properly. And lastly, every now and then you're going to have this situation where you have a 41mm hole and you're trying to fit a dub bottom bracket through. In this case, the BB Infinite is about the only solution that is actually workable, and I'd probably only fit it to road bikes and TT bikes because they're really not weatherproof at all. They do roll quite well, but the durability is definitely nothing to write home about. In this situation, there is probably only one thing on the market. So what is the best bottom bracket? Well, here is the official answer to that question. Now, if you have a metal frame that is aluminium, steel or titanium and you're running Shimano cranks, the best bottom bracket you can fit is a Chris King. If you've got a metal frame and you need to run any other size of cranks, that's BB30 or SRAM dub, then again, Chris King wins. If you have a carbon frame, I still think the best option is a press fit, in which case the winner is definitely BB386 Evo, and I think Rotor are making the best bottom brackets for that solution. And before we end, if you really are opposed to press fit, then I think T47 internal is probably the solution you're looking for. But to be honest, I really don't know who's making good bottom brackets of this standard yet. I haven't come across one that's really, really impressed me. And with that, we're done.